Hi, my name's Angela Casey and welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors, the podcast that explores Edinburgh's green spaces and the people in them. And today it's a bit dreary, but it's calm at the moment, and I'm in the Royal Botanic Gardens of Edinburgh, and it's quite quiet here today because it's quite early. Actually, we were the first people in almost. We're going to walk up and visit the Nepalese prayer gate, which is up on the hill near the main house. You can hear the wind in the trees. They've had quite a lot of damage here because of Storm Eowyn, and I'm told we might get the sound of chainsaws in the background and people moving things around. They lost Edinburgh's tallest tree somewhere, which is a shame. So they've been really busy with that. There's a campaign running. If you feel like donating, you can go onto their website and find out about it. And I'm here today because we're going to look at the Nepalese prayer gate, and I'm with Richard Love, who is not quite a lifelong, but a long-time Drystone Waller, and he was involved in the building of this prayer gate. And I thought that what we'd do is we'd walk up through the Botanics, have a chat about Richard's career, and then we're going to look at the gate, and he's going to tell me all about how they built it and the thinking behind it, and about Drystone Walling generally, which is a fascinating subject, and I'll know more about it shortly. So welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors, Richard.
Hello.
So is it a viable career?
That's a question, because I set off doing it not with the intention of doing it full-time or expecting to earn a full-time living. So I think I had to bear in mind that don't give up the day job, but don't rely on it as a full-time job that will earn you a comfortable living. Well, I was going to be an actor, but I ended up just doing it as an amateur thing. It wasn't going to be a viable career.
Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, when I left university, but I ended up working in occupational medicine as a physiologist, and then changed from that to do Drystone Walling, which is an obvious move.
Is it?
No. But it was something different that I decided at the age of late 40s and thought, do I want to do what I'm doing now all the rest of my life? And decided to look for something different, and came across Drystone Walling. And
I mean, it's very different.
it is very different. I was always keen on outdoor activities, so the physical activity of building walls wasn't a big problem. I just got used to it fairly quickly. Change of routine, obviously, not working in an office. Although I did mix up my Drystone Walling activities with, let's call it, writing in the general sense, because I'd fancy myself being able to earn a living as doing some sort of writing. But the Drystone Walling took off. I set up a business and then got drawn into the whole craft scene. So within a year I was involved with the Drystone Walling Association, which is a sort of national body that promotes the craft, provides education through training, and I became chairman of the one in southeast Scotland, and I still was until about 2 months ago.
So you've just stopped doing it?
Well, I stopped working, but I still do voluntary work with the association.
It's one of those things that's had a bit of a resurgence, hasn't it? People being interested in crafts and...
Yeah, I mean, this craft had a resurgence in the late 1960s, because with agriculture going through a period of mechanisation, there was a loss of labour on the land, so the walls weren't being maintained around the countryside. So competitions were set up, and then the association was set up to try and keep that going. We, through the association, have tried to get a lot more people, young people particularly, into the craft by setting up bursary schemes, and we've got people on board who've got national funding through the Heritage Lottery Fund, as it was, and that brought in a lot of younger people who essentially worked like apprentices with professional Drystone Wallers around the country. I mean, you can build up to that if you're very good, or you have a regular type of work that you can maintain, like agricultural work, but that doesn't pay particularly well. So a lot of us get into private work, through people's gardens, or sometimes with commercial organisations who are looking to enhance their work environment. And you mostly work on your own, which is what I did and wanted to do, but then you get bigger jobs that you just take on other people. So you end up employing other people to do work with you, which isn't particularly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do work on my own. I thought I'd be working in the countryside most of the time, so I thought I'd be up in the hills on my own all day, which initially I was. And you get very much in your own head, and get absolutely knocked over, literally, when somebody comes by and says hello. But then a combination of circumstances, meeting other people, and you start working on people's gardens, because it's very much a word of mouth business. And then you have to build up your skill, because working in people's gardens, it needs to be much neater, and the stone needs to be more particular to the buildings that you're working alongside.
And you've got to be polite to them.
Yes, now that doesn't work for everybody. And you have to be patient with people, because it's their garden. If they stand over your shoulder looking what you're doing, or even offering to help, you have to be very diplomatic. And some of them would have been on a course, so they may have some basic skills.
That was the bell ringing.
That bell, the guy had said, the bell's been taken away for cleaning or something, so I didn't know it was back.
Oh, so it's being cleaned. We're going to ring it.
Yeah, it's meant to be there. It's a part of the prayer gate. It's not as it originally would be on a hillside in Nepal. It's close by where I live, so I visit quite often.
Oh, you come here a lot, do you?
Yes, and sometimes have a look at the prayer gate to see how it's doing.
The bits ever fall out? Do you ever have to come and sort
once,
it?
just fairly recently, there was a little thin piece at the top I saw had just come out, so I just pushed it back in, but nobody would ever notice.
I mean, it's built pretty solidly, isn't it?
Well, luckily it's got a very big lintel on top that had to be lowered by crane, so that holds everything in place. And the whole idea of Drystone walls is that as long as the stone is well positioned, the weight of the stone above it, and in this case a lintel, will hold it in place. That shouldn't need maintenance other than just keeping an eye on.
It looks really solid, and it's a beautiful shape.
Yeah, that's part of it, because these are found on the hillside in western Nepal, and the idea is that it's a Buddhist country, and the local people would walk through, maybe throw some flowers on the top and ring the bell that is in the middle, hanging under the lintel as they go through. Here you can't do that, because it's just a feature as part of the Nepalese area of the garden.
You can ring the bell, though.
Oh, I can ring the bell, and
Okay, you ring
I've
the
always
bell.
wanted to ring the bell.
How many times are you meant to ring it?
I don't know. I haven't got that far in my Buddhist training. I mean, having been in Nepal, I do know that they have prayer wheels which you're meant to spin direction.
There's a bit about it on the Botanic's website where they show pictures of you building it with your colleagues.
Yes.
It was 2 colleagues. What were their names?
Dave and Alan. Alan is no longer with us, but it took a bit longer than expected because of the nature of the stone and the nature of the shape of it. It's not easy shape to build.
I know nothing about Drystone walling. I'll still know nothing after I've spoken to you. But when you see a wall, it's Drystone wall, there's an art, isn't there? But here you've created this lovely
it's got
curve.
Yes, I mean, it's got 3 dimensions. I mean, you're building essentially 2 pillars which curve over on the outside so it's wider at the bottom than the top, and it curves from the bottom on the gate itself. It sort of curves outwards and then inwards again where the lintel sits, so it's like 2 convex shapes. And in other words, the stone is overhanging, which is unusual in dry stone structures. They're normally getting narrower from the bottom to the top so that it's more secure. But when you've got a big lintel on top, like this is, then that is held in place by the weight of the stone. And each stone is just edged slightly overlapping as it goes up. So the weight of the stone itself and will hold it in place. It's how you get shelters which are just have stone curving inwards. The word has escaped me at the moment.
Oh, like on a bridge, or like on St Kilda, those cleats on St Kilda.
St Kilda is a good example. They have the cleats, which are sort of small stone structures that were used for storing or drying birds, which were the main food of the St Kildans back in the day when it was inhabited. So they have hundreds of these structures. They're completely enclosed with it. Well, they have an opening, but they were open weave in the sense that air could come through, stop the rain coming in, and it could be used to dry bird meat for later consumption. They were built fairly roughly. This is a more organised structure so that every stone is in position and doesn't move. Up on the hillside in Nepal, they would be much more loosely built.
I saw that because on the website for the Botanics, you can see the pictures of them, and they were much more rough than this. This is actually very beautiful, the way that it curves like that.
Yes, I mean, the stone is much more regular, and you can see some of the faces are cut. It came like that from the quarry, and they do have a cutting machine that, so a lot of the pieces you can see cut edges. It took more time to build than it would if the stone was more natural, lying about the hillside.
So are you more used to building with stone that you pick up around where you are?
It's a mixture. I mean, the original Drystone walls would have been built with stone lying about the ground. In more recent times, when agriculture became the norm instead of hunter-gathering, walls would be built to secure animals, to protect crops, to enclose land. And a lot of the stone originally would have been just cleared off the land, and then when walls were built in a more ordered way, when Enclosures Acts came in, then stone had to be quarried locally. So that was brought from as close as possible to where the walls were going to be built. But it had to be a lot more of it, hundreds and hundreds of tons. And that's how the craft developed in a more organised way. And there were descriptions of how walls should be built, trying to standardise it, which of course is very difficult when the stone varies so much from one place to another. So the stone we see here is quite regular, flat-bedded sandstone. We gave the staff at the Botanical Gardens an idea of the sort of stone we wanted, and so they got about 8 tons of stone. We were lucky in that the botanical staff here wanted to get involved. They wanted to make it an inclusive project. So they got some of their volunteers to come. Now, as we can see, this is a complex-looking object. You wouldn't start a novice off on building this. So we had to get them to empty the bags and lay out the stone under our direction so that the stone was laid out in a way that made it easier for us to select and pick for the job. And 1 or 2 people just put a few stones in the middle because it wasn't being run as a training course, it was being run as a project by those who knew how to do it with a bit of assistance.
A noisy bird there.
Yeah,
That's going to be really noisy in the background, but it won't matter because we're in the Botanics, you get birds. It's nice. So you 3 guys came along and you were the experts and you were building it, but you got some help. They put out the stones.
Yeah.
And you then begin to map out what's going where.
Yes, the way I work it, I don't have plans. I have a rough idea of how big it's going to be, and then you mark out the area on the ground. And the idea is that normally the biggest stones will go at the bottom, and as you get higher up, the stones are smaller, simply because the space is normally slightly less as you go up. So we always instruct people to choose the biggest stones to the bottom, because you'll always need the smaller ones for further up. This one, not quite so important. So there is some element of size decreasing as it goes up. Some very thin pieces at the top, because you have to level it up before putting on, in this case, a lintel. In other cases, just big cover stones or coping stones. But that's part of what you learn to do, is select the stone, choose the stone for the right place, and build the stone in the right way. So although this looks just like stone laid out in an ordered way, the order is very much not just how it looks from the outside, but how the stone goes in. So you think all walls look the same. Even a brick wall has some resemblance to this, but bricks, of course, are very regular. Natural stone is not. So learning to select the stone so that all these joints are covered, so that one stone sits across a joint between 2 other stones, that's what you're trying to achieve, because that gives it strength.
The thing that's amazing to me, though, is that on the left here, particularly, you've got that very sharp corner. So you've picked stones that make that sharpness and this smoothness here.
Yeah. I built all this side because the other 2 were less experienced and they worked together. But we had a wooden former to give that shape, because it wouldn't want to do it too freehand. You need some sort of guidance,
right?
Because it's not a natural shape, and so you wanted to get it as near as possible to a balanced shape. So it's close, but close enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, because it is built of natural material that would be quite a lot rougher than this.
Yeah.
In reality, on a Nepalese hillside. Once we decided on the height, so that it was pretty well high enough for somebody to stand under. That meant that we had to design the finished top to be exactly the right width for the lintel, which you can see is a rough stone. It's not an even stone, so that was sitting some distance away, so I had to constantly go over and measure it to make sure that the width of the lintel was going to sit exactly on the top of the two pillars at the side were shaped like. So it was a constant going back to and fro to make sure that the stone was going to fit, and luckily when it was lowered on it fitted almost exactly first go.
And how long did it take you?
I think it took us about 4 working days, and people coming by and we were telling them what we were doing. So that's part of it. You're building and you're always talking to people, and sometimes they want to help or take pictures. And that's, for me, that's now become part of the process, is selling the idea of what Drystone Walling is. Sometimes you recruit people to come on a course, so that's even better.
Because there are courses that are run, aren't there, that people can go?
We like to do best is you find somewhere where there is an existing wall, say on a farm, and persuade the farmer that he'd like a wall built, and we can do it for him for either for free or a donation. And you get people along at a weekend, usually for a 2-day course, and we take down the wall, lay the stone out, and then you rebuild it according to the plan that they are learning as they go along. And it's amazing, in 2 days you can get somebody to build a wall that looks as good as everything else around it. It's not a race to the finish, it's just getting it right. And one of the things people don't realise is that from the outside it looks like bricks, as you would say, a brick and a stone, but the length of the stone has to go inside, unlike a brick wall where a brick is laid along the face, what we would call tracing, whereas Drystone Walling, the stone has to go in as much as possible, because you're not using any mortar to stick it together. So the weight of the stone and the positioning of the stone is what counts. Stone has weight, stone has friction, and that's what holds it together.
I go walking in Yorkshire and they have a lot of Drystone walls.
Yes.
And a lot of those tiny stiles that you have to squeeze through.
Yes.
But also they have those steps that stick out. Do those steps go right the way through the wall?
Usually they do. What you call steps are sometimes, all Drystone walls would have what we would call a through stone. So it usually sticks out one side and the other of the wall, and people do use them as steps. So that's a way of creating a style. But walls will have a through stone, ideally every metre. So if you see a typical Drystone wall, it would look a bit like an A shape in cross section. So it's wide at the bottom and maybe half the width at the top, and that would have a stone or more than one stone sitting on the top, doing like a lintel, just sort of holding everything in place. So that's what makes the thing work as a structure and makes it stable. And it doesn't need much maintenance, but maintenance is needed. An eye needs to be kept on it, just to make sure it hasn't been dislodged by animals and humans.
So I know from the Botanic site that they brought a crane along
Yeah.
to put it on. I'm just thinking now, if you were building one of these up a hill in Nepal,
I know.
How do they get
That's something that puzzles a lot of people when they see ancient stone structures. How on earth did they move the stone without mechanical aid? I think in Nepal they'd probably had a number of people lifting together. I have lifted big stones, and there's ways of doing it by doing it in the easy stages, but there's no way I would expect to lift it that high. That's 6 feet high.
Interesting, that child came along and she rang the bell. So.
Yeah, so you don't need to encourage people to do that. In fact, I came here not long after it first been built. I gave a talk in the Botanic Gardens because it was their project. They had a plants person and a person who'd been to Nepal and taken photographs and decided it would be good to have a gate here, and I got brought in. So we gave a talk and then we all came up and I talked about the gate as I'm doing to you, just to describe how it came about and what it's for. I brought my wife up, who was at that time disabled, and people come along and then you watch them ring the bell, and my wife said, "Are you going to tell them you built it?" And I said, "Okay."
I love the sound of it in the background. It's really nice.
Well, when I was in Nepal, I came back with a yak bell, because bells on animals that graze in the hillside in Nepal and in other countries like Switzerland, they have these bells and they have a lovely sound, which must be annoying for the animal concerned when they hear it all the time, but it's a lovely, evocative sound.
I'm going to ring the bell. I think I should, didn't you? It has a lovely sound, doesn't it? So if you're thinking of things that you've made, what's the thing that you're most proud of? What structure are you most proud of?
Ooh. I think, funnily enough, this one we're standing at, but because it's unusual and people look at it and stop, but they do like the look of it, and because it has a meaning, it's related to a particular culture in a particular country. So, I'm not saying it's cultural appropriation, but we've taken something that does exist in an environment to reflect the garden it's situated in. Because it's near to where I live, it's somewhere I can visit regularly. You know, there are places in the hills, obviously, which I built or rebuilt a Drystone wall. I can't even recognise the bit that I've done, so I don't even know or even remember I've built it. Whereas here, I always know this is something that I did get involved in from the start.
We're now walking up towards Inverleith House, which is in the middle of the gardens and is where the cafe is. And we're just looking at the view because there's a beautiful view across to the castle. Oh, we're going up to look at a cone, which is another Drystone feature.
This is a cone, like a fir cone standing on its base, so it's narrow at the bottom and gets quite wide about a third of the way up, and then it narrows again to almost to a point, and it's all made of just dry stone. And slate's a good stone to use because it's quite thin and long, and the stone you can get running into the middle, so you can build it overhanging, and then the stone on top holds everything in place. So one cone I had built did start tilting over, so I had to take the whole thing down, lay the stone out, and then rebuild it on a more solid foundation, which was a bit annoying, but these things happen.
That must be annoying. But I guess patience must be one of your virtues.
Oh yes, no, especially when you're trying to instruct other people. I did have some say, how are you so patient with us, or with me? I said, well, just imagine if I wasn't, nobody would gain anything by me losing my temper. As an instructor, one of the things you learn is how to be patient, how to recognise people's different learning abilities and speed, and just take them with you. And you are not there to show them, to build it. You have to get them to understand how to build it and then build it themselves. If you start taking over the building, then it's no longer a training course, you're just showing off. So that's a good skill to learn, and now that's mainly what I do. I run training courses through the Drystone Walling Association and sometimes on my own account, because there's quite a demand. I mean, it's a huge demand nationally. The Drystone Walling Association runs courses all over the country, and that's essentially what we do. We're promoting the craft as a craft, and hopefully some of those people who come on the training courses follow it on with their own business if they want to take it that far, or expand other businesses they're doing, like gardening or landscaping, or they just do it for fun and learn how to do it, and that's it. Or they've got a project in their garden they want to learn how to do. So we cater for all sorts of different groups of people, and sometimes organisations want a training day, like maintenance staff on a country park, or people are doing a corporate away day and want something to get them out of the office and give something back to the countryside. So all sorts of things generate courses, and it's just great to be able to pass that skill on to anybody who's interested.
So somebody wants to go and do one of those courses, and they do a couple of days and they learn how to build the wall.
Yes.
But they wouldn't be able to set up a business after doing that.
No.
They go and do other levels.
We provide qualifications up to Master Craftsman. We can monitor that, so if there are complaints, we do hold people to account, because our reputation as an organisation depends on our qualification system. So it is a skill that it takes years and years to learn, and because every job is different, because the stone is different, you're always learning. So you need that breadth of experience before you can take on a job as a professional activity. So we can provide that qualification and certificates for people.
Yeah, you're not going to do a 2-day course and then produce this cone, are you?
No, I mean that's the problem. People have an idea that they've got something they want, and they come on a training course, and it's not everybody can pick it up straight away. And I've had people working for me, 20 years, and they come on a training course, and they think, who've taken years to get the skill, others who pick it up straight away. It just depends on the way your brain works, I think. And I was lucky. I picked it up very quickly and could do it as a profession within 6 months. That's not always the case.
Is it good business, do you think? Is it something that's growing?
It is a very traditional craft, so you expect to find it more in the countryside, but increasingly people like things in their gardens, whether it's walls or features, steps, seats. So it does allow you to extend your skills. You can get better at it by doing more advanced things. But a lot of people will start off working for somebody else because they don't feel confident running a business. That's quite common in craftspeople. They don't necessarily want the hassle of running the business, and often small businesses fail for that reason.
But there's a workflow, is there?
Yes, there's quite a lot of people looking for jobs, but those who are already working want to take somebody on who's got the skill. They don't want to spend the time supervising and training people, so they want people who are ready-made. So it's a chicken and egg thing. You go on a course, but how are you going to get more skilled? So people like me who are looking to retire from their business are more willing to take people on because they're not wanting to make lots of money. They're wanting to make people to take over their work so that the craft continues. So I was willing to take people on initially for no money, but if they're good enough, then obviously they deserve to be paid. It does have that element of traditional apprenticeship, and because the association has created apprenticeships, that means you can train people through from standing start to really good qualification who can then be good enough to run their own businesses or work with somebody who's trained them in the first place. So it works both ways. It's a word of mouth thing where people will hear about you. I've never had to advertise. I'm in the Drystone Walling Association professional register, so you pay a small amount of money for that, but it gets you work, or it should get you work, and that's kept me going through most of my working life in the last 30 years.
Wow, so it was a good career move.
If they like the outdoors, they're good with their hands, they're good in their own company, they're patient with clients and other people working with them. You don't have to be strong. There's plenty of women doing it as a job. It's something pretty well anybody could do if they put their mind to it. But if you've got a skill you're already doing, don't give up the day job until you know you can do Drystone walling. That will, not only you can do it, but you can earn money doing it. It's not going to make you a fortune, but one or two people have got very good and got a very good reputation.
I ask everyone the same questions. You were doing another career, as we talked about earlier, and then you switched to do Drystone walling because you were an outdoors person, is that right? So what does the outdoors mean to you? Why did you want to do a career that took you out into it?
Well, ever since I was a small child, I just loved the outdoor, the hills. I lived by the sea when I was growing up. I liked being on the beaches, I liked climbing the cliffs, climbing the hills. And then I got involved in running, hill walking. So that, in a sense, it was a natural thing to be in the outdoors if the opportunity arose. So when Drystone walling came up as a career change, I could be in the hills all the time. Initially, I was working in the hills, adding to the environment. So the Pentland hills outside Edinburgh was where most of my work was. And that's where I used to go walking and running and cycling as well.
And has there been a time where it's helped you through a difficult time, or where it's been a focus for you?
I think it's always, I think because I spent so much time out in my previous job, which was obviously more office-based, I would go out for a run at lunchtime. And I realised that could put all the problems I'd had during the day or in the morning, I could resolve by the time I got back at my desk. So I did begin to realise that running out in the parks, in the hills, if you had a personal problem or a work problem, you could just not quite run it off, but you could put it into context and not worry about it.
And as I said to you earlier, I always ask people where their favourite place is in or around Edinburgh. Where would you say that yours is?
I think we've probably already hinted at that, the Pentland Hills, because for Edinburgh people who like the outdoors, it's the big lung, the big place that you can go and get lost, sometimes literally, but it's on the doorstep, and it's so different from the Edinburgh environment that you can get up there and get it out of your head that any problems, I can do that every week. still do it. So I think it would have to be the Pentland Hills.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Richard.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed that. That's been nice. I'd love to come and see the Nepalese Gate. I enjoyed ringing the bell and seeing the structures and talking about Drystone Walling.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Revisiting something that was quite a few years ago now.
Yeah, and we'll put some links on the podcast so people can find out more. And we'd also thank the Royal Botanic Gardens of Edinburgh for letting us come here and visit the Nepalese Gate. And now we're going to go and have a cup of their coffee.
Hooray!
Right. If you've enjoyed the Edinburgh Outdoors podcast, please rate us on your podcast app and leave a review. And don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues about it too. If you know of an outdoor space in or around Edinburgh that might like to be featured, you can get in touch by email, Instagram or TikTok.